Hi everyone, my name is Zaina Siddiq. I'm with Minaret Foundation, where our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement. Today we have three wonderful panelists joining us who are Muslim, Christian, and Jewish to talk about mental wellness during this time, specifically for faith leaders, as well as because of this time, there's a lot of anxiety, depression. People are stuck in their homes with no access to a lot of things, and this can lead to a lot of serious problems. We also have seen a spike in abusive cases, domestic and child abuse, during this time. So faith leaders are people turn to them, not just for spiritual guidance, but for mental health issues as well. So today we're joined by Dr. Asim Shah. We're also joined by Gittel Francis from Jewish Family Service and Garr from Guided Restoration. To talk about this issue are people currently how faith leaders can fine-tune their advice and counsel and the counseling for the faithful. So before we begin, can we have our panelists introduce themselves? Dr. Asim Shah, please.
You want me to start?
Yes, please.
Sure. Okay. So my name is Asim Shah. I'm a psychiatrist by profession and work at Baylor College of Medicine as the executive vice chair and professor, and also I am the chief of psychiatry at Ben Taub. And that's basically it.
Okay.
It's a pleasure being with the other two panelists. I'm looking forward to interesting discussion.
Yes. Gittel Francis, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Gittel Francis. I'm a social worker. I work at Jewish Family Service, and one of the things that I do as part of my job at Jewish Family Service is that I do community trainings, and we do outreach to the community about this specific topic about mental health and mental wellness in the community. This is something new that we're doing because it used to be that we kind of waited for clients to come to us and get our help, but we realized that there's a lot going on in the community that sometimes people don't know what the resources are out there, and sometimes common people don't know the signs and symptoms of mental health conditions, just the typical things to look out for. So the thing that I do is primarily suicide prevention, but also mental health literacy to the entire community of Houston.
That's great. Garr, please.
Hi, my name is Garr, and I'm a licensed specialist in school psychology, as well as a licensed professional counselor supervisor. And I have a practice in the Richmond-Rosenberg area, Sugarland area, in that corner of the Houston suburbs. And so it's guided restoration, and I have other jobs and that I contract at. I work in the school district, as well as I am a adjunct instructor at the Houston Graduate School of Theology. I'm very excited about the dialogue today. I think it's necessary. I think it's important. And the first step is the dialogue. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. So we're just we've gotten the introductions out of the way, so we're just gonna start with our first question. So mental health seems to be on top of everyone's mind right now, in the midst of the pandemic and current events. What hurdles are faith leaders facing when it comes to the wellness of their congregants? Anyone can start. Dr. Asim Shah?
Yeah. Of course, faith leaders can answer that better than I can, but what I have seen, I've done some town hall with faith leaders in different areas in Fort Bend with our judge and faith leaders. What I've seen in terms of hurdles is that mental health continues to have a stigma. We all know that. And it is not easy to convince people to seek professional help. Of course, it's easy for people to open up to their congregants or to open up to their pastors or rabbis or imams because they trust them. There's always some level of trust there. There's always some level of rapport there. So it's easy for them to open up. But when they are advised to seek professional help, then the stigma continues to be there. And that's the time when it becomes difficult for everybody. And I think our goal should be not only today, not only tomorrow, but on a continuous, ongoing basis to reduce the stigma. What I mean by that is that we should have awareness of mental health. We should have awareness of symptoms of mental health throughout the year, all the time. Whether we do it in Sunday schools or classes, or for teenagers, or for kids, or for adults, we need to talk about it on an ongoing basis so that people A, know the symptoms, B, they know what to do. Because the few things which are important, which go hand in hand. One is, of course, awareness, which means they need to know the symptoms of mental illness, they need to know what to look for. The second is stigma needs to be gone so that if they need help, they can approach somebody. And last, they need to know the resources. Because if you don't know the resources, even if you know the symptoms, you are stuck. So all these things go hand in hand to me. Awareness, reducing the stigma, and the resources. And they continue to be a big challenge, I'm sure, for faith leaders also. That is what I hear. That is a big challenge for everybody. But I think faith leaders can play a bigger role than us. Why? Because they already have a trust developed with a lot of people, and they can use that trust for the positiveness.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Gittel Francis?
Yeah, so Dr. Shah, you took the words out of my mouth, and I kind of agree with you on that.
I'm a psychiatrist, so we can read minds.
There are some things that I would add to that, and I think that many times during my trainings, I almost always get the question of, at what point do we recommend people for professional help? And I think that you're right in saying that congregants feel more comfortable coming to their rabbis or their imams or to their spiritual leaders to talk about feelings. I also think that there's a lot that spiritual leaders can do to help people. Anybody can assess the situation. Anybody can listen to the person, providing people with resources. And I think that the most important thing is for people to know at what point do I need professional help? At what point should I recommend that this individual get professional help? And it really has to do with the fact is if your emotions and your feelings interrupt your ability to be able to work or carry out daily activities or to be able to regulate your emotions and stuff like that. In short, what we say is if it interrupts your ability to live, laugh, and love, and at that point you should get help. So I also think that besides for the resources and the professional mental health, practitioners, there's so much that we as faith leaders, as a society, there's so much that we can do, providing people with resources, but also something like self-care and self-help goes a long way with mental health. So I think that it's important for people to know the resources and for people to, for sure, break down stigma. Dialogue breaks down stigma, but also of what each and every one of us could do on an individual level to support ourselves with our own mental health and also to support each other with their mental health conditions as well.
I agree with you both. Mm-hmm. And I think that those are relative factors. It's like, okay, I'm last and now everything's been said. No. But in addition to that, I want to also add the fact that not everybody feels comfortable going to their faith community. And so we need to be able to, because there are a lot of conversation and because the families know each other, they're not always comfortable with going into their faith community and starting to disclose. Or if they feel it's something, they see mental health different than their faith community. So it's like, will they accept it? Will they tell me I can just pray about it? Or, not really acknowledging that it is a serious issue and it can be a chemical imbalance. So I think that it's important for us to play our parts. Oftentimes, one entity tries to play a part of everyone, okay? And one entity can't do that. But when we play our parts, then we are more of a force and we can empower each other. But if one is just doing everything, the individual or the community or the faith leader is depleted. So we need to make sure that we're working together and playing parts. So I really believe it's important to partner with. What I'm hearing also from faith leaders is I know my limitations. And when we get into mental health, I don't know where to go with that. I don't have the strategies. I have a lot of faith leaders that are going into counseling, getting their degree to get, more insight on the skill level and to get that skill level. And so one thing that we want to be careful is not to cause harm. So if you're not knowledgeable, make sure that you have a connect, make sure you have a contact, and allow people to play their part. And it's nothing, referring out is important. Having people talk about the dialogue that it's nothing wrong with getting help. I think that stigma has been out there, and every community has their perception of what it is. But like everybody say, if you have a mental condition, you're going to go and get help for it. So why not a mental health condition? And it affects not only that individual, but it affects the whole community, that family, whoever else. So if we're not talking about it, then people just lie in shame. And that's not what we want to do. And that's not what's going to develop a community.
And I would like to add to what you both said, which was absolutely true. And Francis stole my words too, so good. But truly, we talk about stigma and then we say mental health. Think about it. The word mental has stigma. Why should we even call it mental health? I was actually at a synagogue, I remember about a year ago on Braeswood, and we had a whole discussion, and I said, no, I'm not going to call it mental health. We're going to call it brain health. Why? Because mental has stigma to it, and we're not going to do that. So call it brain health, call it even psychiatric health. But the word mental continues to have a stigma, and people feel that, oh, I'm mentally incapacitated. I need mental health. No, that's just not still right, in spite of the fact that we have done so much. Even behavioral health. Why can't we just simply call it psychiatric health? We call neurological health, we call others, so we can just call it psychiatric health. No stigma to that.
Yes, agreed. Perfect. Perfectly said. So moving on to our second question. Have you seen any innovations in approach or problem solving specific to the issues we're facing today?
I can go on that if you guys want. Absolutely. Because if you think about it, we used to do some telehealth, telepsychiatry before COVID. We used to do a little bit of it, but COVID, it seems like, made a turbo boost to everything. And we had to do telehealth. There was no choice. We had to do visits by video, by phone. We have seen so many apps, video apps, which are very good, and some of them are free. And we're using telehealth, and it's working very good, especially in this field, in the field of psychiatric health. Video is very good. Telephone is even okay too, but video is even better. You don't have to see the person in person because we don't do physicals. We don't even shake hands most of the time. So video works very well. So that is the biggest innovation which works to the best for us. And why it is good? Because when you talk about stigma, when you talk about going to see a psychiatrist in medical center, parking, then waiting in the waiting room, maybe 10 other people who you may feel are not the right people, that increases the stigma. Whereas if you are sitting in your home, in the comfort of your dining room or your study, the stigma is less. So for us, the biggest innovation is telehealth, which is working very good. And it is easy, it is same effective as others. And I think the compliance rate for us, for our patients, have increased at least twofold, if not more.
Gittel?
That's amazing. Yeah, so one of the things on my list was obviously telehealth. Thank you, Dr. Shah. But you put it in such eloquent words that I definitely appreciate you. And I believe that everybody's transition to telehealth has been phenomenal between schools and mental health and doctor's appointments and all that. One of the other things that I thought was really, really great is that I feel like right now more than ever, there's so much talk about mental health in the news. Like there's so much talk about the concern, this sort of like this world or collective concern for mental health. And I think that it's been boosted by the fact that, because of what's happening with the pandemic and because of what's happening with all the social injustices in the world, I feel like the conversation around mental health has taken such center stage with everything that almost as if we are breaking down stigmas just by this universal talk of mental health, and I definitely really appreciate that. And the other thing that I find pretty amazing is to see people's resiliency, like to hear Dr. Shah talk about his patients, being more compliant, the fact that kids were able to get onto school, and the fact that patients who never used a computer before are now doing telehealth. Like, if somebody came over to me in March and somebody said to me, you're going to change yourself completely. The way you're doing something right now, is going to be very different. And I would say, I don't have brain space for this. I'm not able to do it. And yet here we are. We're on Zoom. We're in our homes. We're resilient. And I think I find comfort in the fact that resiliency really, really does help us during times of need.
Yes, well stated. One thing that I would add to the both, I agree with the telehealth, and I also agree with the resiliency. I think so often we can focus more on the negative of individuals instead of the positives. Like even when a client, comes in, I want to make sure that I ask about their strengths. They may not be able to identify them at the time, but it's important to acknowledge them. And so often we can focus more on the negatives of what's wrong, even when we talk about mental health, which I love brain health. But even when we talk about mental health, the first thing is what is wrong. And so I believe that needs to be restructured. Another thing with telehealth, I think it's an awesome element. However, sometimes we have to be totally shaken up in order to, think of different ways. People have been innovative in many different ways. However, oftentimes people get very comfortable and safe in what they're doing that we don't think outside of ourselves. We haven't used half our brain capacity. And so it's so many things that we can venture into and be innovative about. But in the same instance, we like to stay safe and comfortable. And so I really like that it shook us up a little bit to what I would say restart us. Sometimes, we need to restart. We get so comfortable in how we've been living or how we're surviving that we never take the time to reset. And so when we reset, then we're looking at what are those patterns that no longer work for me. But if you never take that time, you just operate and take those old patterns into your new season. And so that's another thing. Also with telehealth, there's pros and cons to everything. And that's the thing, being able to look at all aspects of it. Yes, the compliance is one thing. Another thing that we're seeing is individuals are more apt to be open because they're in their homes, they're comfortable. So that's a wonderful thing. However, we do also lose that intimacy of how they respond. Like, for instance, I'm sitting right here. If I was somebody who's very nervous, I could talk to you and present very well, but underneath this table where you can't see, I can be clenching my fist, being very nervous, where if I saw you in person, then I can acknowledge and ask you, do you know why you are clenching your fist? Do you know why you're shifting your hands? Because that's still relative to bringing about an awareness. And everything is about bringing that unconscious to conscious. And so when we operate in that manner, then we can function better in what we know. So I do believe in all those aspects, but oftentimes there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah, 100%. So the fourth question, which I would like to, dive into more, is what advice would you have for faith leaders seeking to help and pastor their faith well when it comes to mental health and seeking mental health?
Should I go before Dr. Shaw because he's going to take my answer?
He gets all the first answers.
All right, you get the first answers. No, I was joking. I want to hear what you have to say because I'm going to add to it.
That's a tough one because what I have seen in that most of the faith leaders are very aware of a lot of things. They are very aware of even signs and symptoms of mental illness. They are very empathic. They're a good listener. They talk to the people very well. They advise them good. So I have had actually compliments and only compliments about that. I think, though, it will be a good idea to continue to involve the faith leaders and let them know about the resources, because the resources continue to change, and that is something which is, which is something which is absolutely needed. So, for example, people who don't have insurance, what to do, people who live in certain areas, what to do, if you have an emergency, what to do. So, it's absolutely important. And I remember Francis was there during Hurricane Harvey, and we met at that time first. So, faith leaders have been involved in any kind of disaster, any kind of trauma. And when you have seen trauma at the first instance, at the first gate, at the first door, that's when you know how to deal with it. And most of our faith leaders have been involved. So I think they're doing a great job. They need to continue to do that. I think the onus is on us. We need to be available for them in any time of need. Whether it's a consult, whether it is a discussion, whether it is some guidance, whether it is some triage, we need to do that. It's my responsibility to do that. And when I say mine, sure, I'm one person, but a lot of other people need to do that also. And also involve them in knowing about the resources, because that's the only way. We are doing the same thing. What is our purpose? Our purpose is to help human beings. Our purpose is to help patients. We can do it together. We can do it better. And I know Francis does a very good job. And so does
Thank you, Dr. Shah. So I like all that you're saying, and I just want to also echo a few things. Is what Dr. Shah is saying is that knowing the resources out there, sometimes congregation will have one resource is that their go-to resource, but what if there's a waiting list on the counseling session? So it's important to have a few different places, kind of like what Dr. Shah said, to sort of act as a triage. Another thing that I think is very helpful is that for the faith leader themselves to be an example. As professionals, as licensed professionals, we set an example. But I know there was one rabbi in our area that spoke about her own struggles with mental health and her own struggles with her own depression and her own anxiety. And I think that it was very helpful. And if you look at the statistics, this is from the reported cases, 1 in every 5 people live with a mental health condition. So it's up there. I mean, from the 4 of us that are on this panel, 1 of us could be living with a mental health condition. So it's just in order to make it more palatable and to make it more understanding to people, to share your own struggles, to attend the workshops. Like, instead of getting people in your congregation to sign up for a mental health literacy training, that you be the example by attending the workshop, by including yourself in the activities. Basically, what I'm kind of saying in short is, like, by being the change that you want to see in the world. Like, if you want to reduce stigma, you have to reduce the stigma. If you want to talk about, different kind of people, you want to use first person language yourself, so that you can use yourself as an example, and just sort of being an example of the change that you want to see.
Definitely. I definitely agree. You want to be that model that you want to see put in place. Another thing, going back to, as we talked about, the resources, I think it was a very good point in the sense that sometimes they only have that one resource, or they have multiple resources. Here's our resource book. That's overwhelming for a person. And so making sure that we have different resources to offer individuals, because that one resource may not work for the next person. And so also, trust is a major factor. So let's look at possibly developing relationships with mental health professionals. So I would suggest that they develop those relationships, see if they can get a couple, like, come out and speak in the faith community. And also assigning them is like coming out and see what their practice may be. And so therefore you're partnering in a way to heal and to help. And that's what's most important. So, but, to limit some of that or reduce some of that distrust, making sure that we're working on relationships and developing that relationship in order to create that bridge between the two. So I think that's important. And also taking an action. It could be the fact that not only having someone come out, it could be the fact that, you're taking some type of action to where they're speaking or you come and speak, like I said, reinforcing that relationship that's being developed. Or even suggesting that you set up a contract with a mental health professional. They come out once a month, or bi-weekly, or once every 3 months, or quarterly, or whatever the case may be, in order to help support the congregation. So that's one thing that I would also speak to. Another thing is experience. Even though I may have been a faith leader for 20 plus years, there's some aspects in which we have limitations to. I've been doing this work over 20 years. However, I don't know everything. And every client is something new. Every client can present something new. Every client can present something that is like, that's interesting. Let me see. Let me pull from my repertoire, or let me call a colleague. So you never know. So it's not the fact that you're not capable. We're all capable, but we have to also acknowledge our limitations and where we need help and where we can get support. And so knowing where we can get that support. So just because you have the years, you have to also understand the limitations that come with certain experiences. Another thing is understanding that with mental health, it can come at different seasons. Just because, you don't have it this season doesn't mean that you're not going to have it next season. People have different experiences on a daily basis. You may lose a partner, you may lose a child, you may, run into a circumstance where there was some type of violence you experienced. So there's certain things that may occur throughout life. So it's not like a one time you had mental health, or, it can happen at any time in your life, or you can go through a season of, this is a rough season. So I'm sad this season. So what does my support look like? So being able to offer that to individuals, and it's no shame in it. And that's the most important thing that I would suggest, is there's so much shame around it. And especially in the Christian community, at times, it has been when people go into, there's more shame placed on that individual to where it silenced them. And we do not want to silence people, because in silence is where they hurt. And so we want to make sure that we're pulling them out in order to talk about it. We're hearing them. It's not for you to always understand, but I can reach out to somebody that may understand your circumstances and be able to support you. So I think that that's really important to acknowledge.
Yes, wow, that's perfectly said. Everybody. I think like Ray said, the silence is, it's very lonely. It can get very lonely if you have mental health and you are struggling to, seek the help that you need, because of shame and stigma. So the last question is parting thoughts with one key takeaway.
Again, I can start.
Yeah.
That's the order is going. Okay. I think the one takeaway or one thought, it's very difficult to have one thought, but think about it. Why cannot we reduce this stigma? Why cannot we work as a team? Why cannot we take care of each other? Why cannot we get people the help they need, whether they get the help through Jewish Family Services or Catholic Charities or any other place? That doesn't matter. Why cannot we talk about it? Why cannot we be open, like Ray said, that if there is a family history of, or Francis said, if there is a family history of mental illness or psychiatric problem, talk about it. That becomes more personal. So it is our job to talk about psychiatric issues. It is our job to reduce the stigma. It is our job to tell the people that there is hope. It is our job to tell the people that having a psychiatric problem is the same as having diabetes, as having high blood pressure, as having asthma, and help is available. So if we do that, I think that is a win-win situation. Because remember that we feel that, you're not going to have any mental health issues or psychiatric issues if you have a good life or if you have money on this and that. That's completely wrong. A lot of cultures don't accept that they will have any psychiatric issues. Our culture is one of them. No, that's completely wrong too. Mental health does not spare any race, sex, or culture, or ethnicity. It will be the same, some more, some less, but it's not going to spare anything. It doesn't spare any age group. It doesn't spare any socioeconomic status. So we need to talk about it. And the biggest thing which we don't do, which I think we need to do, is, unfortunately, we talk about psychiatric issue / mental health when there is a problem. So I know that they will call me on ABC or CNN or PBS. There is a mass shooting to talk about it. But why not talk about this throughout the year? Because the problem would stay. The problem is not going to be only during that few weeks or that month or that day. The problem will continue. We need to invest in the future of our communities, in our youngsters, by talking about it, by giving them help, by giving them hope. I'm not a faith leader, but I have faith. So in that way, I'm a person of faith. And I think faith leaders play a very, very, very important role. And they are very helpful to us. So we need to continue to take them into confidence. They need to work with us, which they do, but we can even make it better. We need to be available for them. And I'm always happy to share my information and do whatever I can to anybody. But I think that's, if you're talking about one thing, the one thing could be reduce the stigma, talk about it all the time, get people help, provide the resources, and if you are a government entity, try to invest in mental health because that is our future.
So I think that what Dr. Shah said was what I was going to say. I'm going to add to it, and I'm also convinced that Miss Garr is an excellent closer. So I'm going to do my middle part right here. So basically, what I want to add to what Dr. Shah said is I'd like to discuss about one concept that's rarely discussed, and that's the idea of recovery. I think that so much is talked about mental illness, mental health conditions, and I know that Ms. Garr mentioned this also, is that there are different periods in your life where you have less mental health or more mental health, but the fact that giving people hope, giving people information about recovering from depression is possible. Now, there are some mental health conditions that recovery is harder than others, and it takes more work, but that recovery is only possible. And it's so easy to think about a person living with schizophrenia as the person that's at home on one of the avenues or underneath the highway here, but there are many people that live with mental health conditions, that live with schizophrenia, that are doctors and that are really, really good functioning, people that are very typical and that you would never know it. So there's so much that's rife with statistics out there about negativity with mental health and mental health conditions. And that's probably what contributes to the stigma, and that mental health is just as important as physical health. And I know that Dr. Shah mentioned that I worked with him during Hurricane Harvey, and that for some reason we get together during these times.
Exactly.
But at the same time, is that what you're saying is going out to the community, educating the community, so that people know what resources out there, and people know that recovery is possible, and that people also know that there's a lot of myths and there's a lot of things that we all don't know about mental health, and that we sort of just want to change that in the way that we see mental health in general. Now I'm going to look for Ms. Garr to close it for us.
Well, I'll do my best. Thank you. Lots of. Well, let me just first say, everything that was stated by everybody was relative and necessary. And I believe that we need to, what we're, displaying and presenting to everybody out there is, more importantly, to partner, to help, to start the movement and to continue the movement. Oftentimes we can start something, but then we fizzle out and we don't continue. People have difficulty with the maintenance of. It's not necessarily the start. Sometimes it's like, okay, I'll get to the destination, but the maintaining in between is what people oftentimes have an issue with. So hopefully we can get in that pocket of maintaining and together make change and facilitate healing. What's also most important is, our faith leaders. At the end of the day, those structures are that's the point of contact, usually in a crisis. And so that's why it's so important for us to have a voice and to speak to our faith leaders, because that's where communities tend to go first. And so if that's where they tend to go first, then that's where we want to also provide them with the resource. It's hard enough to make the decision to say, I need help, but to go to where you think you're going to get help and not get the help that you need makes it harder. And then you leave an individual broken, and that's not what we're here to do. If they're coming to you in fragments, we don't want to continue breaking them in more fragments. That is not our purpose. And so also having the resource to where they can get the help when they ask for and have the need. Another thing is creating the dialogue. The dialogue is so important. And so not everybody can do one thing. There are differences. We all are functioning in differences. So being able to try to understand, and even if you don't understand, just say, oh, that's a fair statement. I don't quite get it, but it's a fair statement. But it's when we operate in the competition of what's right and what's wrong is when we start to lose the connection with each other. So just the fact I don't necessarily agree or I have a different perspective is a place that we need to be okay with, in order to hear what the differences are. Battling the competition, battling the differences, it's what's hindering us from moving forward. So another thing is that dialogue, acknowledging and respecting differences, and also taking action. We don't want to just talk and not have any movement. So making sure that you are taking an action. Another thing is those stigmas. One big thing is the fact of we keep it in house, or, you don't talk to other people about your business. That usually was the stigmas before and some of the myths that people operated in. And at this time, we can no longer operate in that. It only silences individuals. So one thing that I know is I was designed to do the work that I'm doing at this time. So God created me to do this. So if he created me to do this, then he created me to be a healing agent for others. So again, operating in the myth that it's not okay, or we're not trustworthy. God also offered the resources in order for you to get the help that you need. So we need to acknowledge and not hold on to people, but get them what they need. And I think that that's so important. So I do believe that people are resilient. I know that oftentimes we operate in, I can do this all by myself, but everybody needs help. So getting to the place of humility to be able to say, I need help. And oftentimes hearing or not discrediting or dismissing somebody to say, oh, you'll be fine, you'll be okay, just pray about it. It's not the fact that that's not a relevant aspect in a healing, but it's not the only aspect. God also presented opportunities in individuals to help us to heal, to make a difference, to make a change. And so let's utilize everybody to do so.
Francis is right. Ray does a very good closing.
Well, thank you very much. Great partnership. Great partnership.
Something to also ponder on, that we talk about social distancing all the time. We should not even use the word social distancing. We should use the word physical distancing, because right now we are socializing. We are socially together. We are talking about it. And social distancing is a little bit depressing, but when you use the word physical distancing, it's less depression.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that I also like to focus on is, instead of talking about mental illness, I kind of talk about mental health conditions. Sort of just that.
Psychiatric health conditions.
Right, or psychiatric health conditions, exactly. So it's not necessarily all about the illness about it, because there's so many different things that we do to contribute to stigma without even knowing it. So just kind of even switching our language around a little bit does wonders.
Mm-hmm.
I so agree with that. I really believe in the reframing. We operate so often in what we've always done. And so I think it is a time to reframe, because we are in an unprecedented times that require different language, that require different terms, and deconstructing some of the terms before that we would use that have negative connotations. So reframing and finding those different terms. Why can't we change the terms? Who said that it has to be just one thing?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, excellent.
That's so true. Thank you all so much for participating in this wonderful conversation. I really hope, and we hope at Minaret Foundation, that this will serve as, at least the starting point for guidance on how to take care of the faithful during this time. My name is Zaina Siddiq. I'm with Minaret Foundation, where our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a blessed day.
Have a great day.